welcome to Property Quorum. As ever, I'm joined by the stalwarts of Hamish McLay of Search McLay, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke, and of course, Chris Gilsenan of Root Home. And we here sit ideally to disseminate the disseminatable, uncover the covered up as far as the property maelstrom that we seem to find ourselves stuck in English property sales. I would say that today's topic, which is buyer beware, or as someone has pointed out quite correctly, caveat emptor, means is that one needs more information than one might see just on the surface before you're making what is potentially the most important buying decision of your life. I'm going to start straight off, without further ado, with the incomparable Hamish McLay.
Well, one of the sad things is my sort of knowledge of Latin is very limited, and I seem to recollect something like Honi soit qui mali pens, which is to do, was my school's motto, allegedly. It seems to be my healthy mind, healthy body, probably because it was a mixed boarding school, which was an experimental one, which was jolly interesting. However, that was rather like fun compared to what it can be when we hit the maelstrom of all the difficulties that are imposed upon us, sometimes unnecessarily, and when we go about sort of trying to buy a property. And sometimes we do forget this, that it does make an awful lot of difference what we do as a buyer. We forget, we try and sort of, it's sort of comment that came up earlier today. It's not so much a blame sort of type of thing. Somebody trying that's actually sort of stepping sideways, so nothing to do with me. Sadly, it is. All of those involved is something to do with, and they can all contribute to an effective step forward. Even if things go marginally wrong, they can be overcome. However, we do need to be, if we're not careful, we can create an awful lot of stress for ourselves if we don't move carefully in the process of trying to get that home of ours.
Juliet, in the modern day, I thought we'd all but smoothed out this process. That it became very easy. Everyone knows what their job is. They get along with it. There are occasional difficulties, but shouldn't this be easy? What pain points to which we refer?
There's so many, because the legislation's changing and, people's appetites are changing, etc. So there's so many pains in terms of property buying. We spoke about caveat emptor just now. That may be something as obvious as it is to a seasoned buyer. It may not be as obvious to a first-time buyer, a newbie on the market. What am I meant to be looking out for? I remember a client going to a property and seeing some rat traps. Now, this was in London, so, it's very normal to live near a tube station. And she said, do you think they've got rats? And I said, you could ask them. But the fact that they've got some rat traps out, suggests that, they've got rats. And she was sort of, taken aback that, she's potentially buying a property with a rat infestation. I mean, there's so much. And for me, again, it goes back to the old saying, get the right people involved. No question is a silly question. Ask as many questions as possible. If you see something, don't wait until you bought the property and then start doing your diligence. Ask about it, a hole in the wall or something that, that triggers you. Searches can only go so far as well. And that's the other thing. The searches that we do get are based on national statistics. So often you'll get an environmental search that says, the property is in an area where there's contamination. But that contamination issue, the fact that you've had people living there for a long time, suggests that that's been dealt with, and it may be that the statistics haven't been updated, so the search hasn't been updated. So there's so many moving parts, as we always say, in relation to the buying of a property. But at the end of the day, you're stuck with this property for a period of time. It may be your a dream home, final home, whatever it is, and you've got to take the time to do the diligence, ask the questions, so that in the end, the pain doesn't come, or whatever doesn't come to bite you. So that's my takeaway on this.
Chris, is it any easier these days? I would have thought that everything seems to be being uncovered. Nothing seems to be remaining hidden. Surely it's a breeze. You just say, I'd like a green one. I'd like a... Is it that easy, or is there still lots of pitfalls?
There's still lots of pitfalls, even for either first-time buyers, residential buyers, or even investors. There's loads of pitfalls. I see it quite a lot with people not knowing the process. In England and Wales, we have this wonderful legal system for property purchasing where it's not actually a done deal until you exchange contract. So anything's up in the air until that happens. And it's quite different in different parts of the UK. But from a buyer's perspective, certainly if they're quite inexperienced, they may not be aware that once they've had their offer accepted, that there's a whole load of things that could go wrong, or a whole load of things that potentially put their dream home at risk of it not completing in the way that they expected. Least of all is people coming in and offering more. So it's one of the reasons that we have the system that we have in England and Wales is that, well, someone could come along to a vendor and say, well, I'll give you an extra 20 grand. And why would they want to miss out on that opportunity? They want to keep their options open. So it's understandable that we have the setup that we do. So it does benefit both parties, as well as prevent a potential lost opportunity. But that's just one of many ways of people getting their hopes dashed to some extent. Another one that I see is quite often certainly for the properties that we sell to our investor clients, or we match them up with. We always advocate having a survey done.
Yes.
And it's just a matter of course. So we're not necessarily relying on the vendor to disclose information, because although they have to, in theory, they could just say that they don't know in the property information form, or they don't recall, or what have you. So we'd at least recommend a third party to go and have an independent third party to go and assess a property and provide them a report. So it's not coming from us per se with our vested interest. It is a genuine and independent third party and giving their perspective on the property. My business partner's got a huge bone of contention with some of the surveys that come through, and that quite often we're sat here reviewing scores of them all the time, and they're quite often a cut and paste job, and cut and paste to the extent that the surveyor's not even read them, and paragraphs are contradicting themselves within a sentence of each other. Like, what are you doing?
No, I got an example of that actually. When I bought the property I'm in, at the end of the property, there's a 2-bedroom bungalow, and when we had it surveyed, the surveyor came back and said that there was no toilet or bathroom in it, which they quite plainly there is. What is going on here? Can you rely on any of these people anymore? I suppose it goes back to Juliet's point. If you've got decent knowledge, local knowledge of people who are going to go not just to the cut and paste, I don't know. Can you rely on these specialists anymore, Chris? I'm
confident that you can rely on specialists, but it's like anything, you need to find the right ones. So it's difficult building a good team of people around you. It takes time and patience, and you have to kiss a few frogs, but you will find the right people to work with. So the very first instance is asking people you know for word of mouth referrals, good and bad. People to avoid as much as people to go and have a conversation with. It's equally important.
Hamish, it seems to me that there seems to be a surfeit of people that put themselves out there as specialists, but you have to really sift through them with a fine-tooth comb.
Well, I'm not exactly promoting the podcast that we have tomorrow afternoon. We're speaking about the subject of cladding.
Why not?
However, it's an interesting topic because at the very end of it, when speaking about it, the question is, who can you trust? You can trust yourself to a certain extent, not entirely, because as Juliet quite rightly pointed out, if you're brand new to this particular process, you don't really know 100% what you ought to be looking at.
Yeah.
However, it is an important thing, and people forget this, that they'll go look at a property and say, wow, that is great. Now, we had this instance, we mentioned it earlier, that people are buying into something, as they did in Royal Artillery Quays, and they weren't informed completely about the backdrop of what was going on with that particular sort of property, because various things were not revealed in any of this. And Juliet was saying this, nothing was revealed in any of the searches to suggest there was anything seriously wrong. Why? Because there's not a facility for it in the way in which this information is kept. And people say, oh, material information, look at all this information you get up. Well, actually, what information do you really need? There's some essential stuff. But the important thing is, I think as a buyer, I mean, one of the great things, and one thing you could avoid, for example, if you're going to be buying, say, a flat, for example, it's quite easy because there's loads of people all living in normally in that particular arena, that particular sort of area. And you can therefore go and ask somebody else who's got a flat there, not just the person you're buying from. As Chris mentions about vested interest, the person that's selling it has got a vested interest because they want to get rid of it. I don't mean it quite like that, but basically they want to sell it on. So they have a vested interest and, getting that off their chest and putting it into somebody else's hands. If you asked a neighbour 2 or 3 doors away or somebody else as they were going in and out, hey, what's it like here? And just get a little bit of feedback from them. And it doesn't half make a difference, because we've taken this gentleman who bought property in Royal Artillery Quays. If they'd spoken to one of the other flat owners there, then they'd turn around and say, oh, bloody heck, we've just had this dumped on us. The fire risk, the expensive insurance, the management costs. Now, you don't need a search to catch. Did you know the interesting thing is that doesn't cost you anything other than 5 or 10 minutes to ask people. And it's very, very important. And we do say this, we're going back to the Latin aspect of it, but the lovely sort of term there, buyer beware. There's lots and lots you can actually do, very simple things. Very often, though, you have to be told that. So yes. You get the right people to give you that information.
Yeah, it's the trouble is we've got, and I've spoken about this before in the quiz. We've got known knowns, and that's the stuff you can prepare for. Obviously, you've got known unknowns. That's the stuff you haven't yet prepared for, but is out there. The stuff that's coming around to kibosh us without our knowledge is the unknown unknowns, and for that you need the conference of a specialist from time to time. Juliet, you must find this all the time, surely, that people just have not prepared adequately.
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing for the consumer, or what they need to be aware of, is that a lot of professionals will have caveats within their instructions or their letters of engagement, which means that if you think you're going to sue someone, a professional engaged, after you've completed, they may very well have fine print in their letters of engagement saying, look, I don't have a responsibility to advise you on this or that. So really, if you are buying a property, I like Hamish's idea. Go and speak to some of the neighbours. Find out what's happening in the neighbourhood. Go to the neighbourhood in the afternoon. Say, for example, you've got off-road parking. Go to the neighbourhood in the afternoon and see how jam-packed it actually is, and whether or not you can find a car parking space for yourself. Those are things where if you are investing in a property, don't just leave it and be lazy and say, look, I'm just going to leave it to the professionals, because there's so much that can be found now on Google. Google the postcode and find out what's happening in the area. You might find newspaper articles. You might, if you're buying a flat, you might have the name of the management company. Go on Companies House and check up everything that there is in relation to this company. Do you see red markings on Companies House? That often suggests they haven't filed their accounts on time, things are overdue. And it's a bad sign. Why would you want to invest in a property where the management is bad? Things like that, which may not necessarily be disclosed to you while you're purchasing. You've got so much information available to you that it's worth the while doing all of those searches and doing the things that you can to ensure that you're not stuck with something that you don't want.
Wow. It does feel like it's a minefield. I suppose we need to start or return to banging the drum for local specialists. I know Hamish is very much, and Juliet and Chris very much champion people that have got established knowledge sets. Factory conveyancing has raised its less than pristine head, and it means that often the same person who is dealing with it isn't the same person who follows it through. The issues get handed around like confetti. Whereas if you're working with an established lawyer, as established provider of services, such a search provider or someone who has already built relationships, you're far more likely to achieve your goal, which is knowing enough information to make a satisfactory purchase. Hamish, would you care to comment and take us home?
Well, it's one of those challenging aspects that when you're left with the last word on something, is to try and say, here we have it. Well, I think we do. There is a solution. There are ways around so many different things, but it does actually come back to we are part of it. We're not part of a problem, because in itself it's not a problem, but we are so much part of the process. We're the ones that has the emotional involvement with that particular property. So if you really want to get involved, really get involved. And I think it's Juliet, at different times of the day, what's the nightlife like? I mean, where we actually sort of live at the moment, it was perfectly all right until somebody opened the nightclub within 100 yards. And then, I ought to say 100 meters. I think it was yards at the time. But anyways, whatever. The noise level at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning was quite disastrous. But who would want to walk there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? Had I spoken to the neighbour about it, the neighbour would have told me. As I said, we can do so much. And in fact, it is emotional, but it can be something which is enjoyable if we're prepared for it, and we prepare ourselves by looking and being part of finding what we really want and engaging with the right sort of people. Speak to somebody who's done a fair old bit of buying, somebody like Chris, he's done a fair old bit of buying. Juliet has done more than a fair old bit of legal work behind the buying. But it's getting to know those people. There are people on here that you can actually speak to all the time, and they'll point you in the right direction. Speak to the right people, and you will get the right solution more often than not.
Vis-a-vis living next to a nightclub, you said you don't know how many people would walk there at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can almost guarantee that most of them wouldn't be able to walk back. But anyway, moving on. As ever, if you've got the right team around you, and I can personally vouch for everyone on this call, then you will achieve your goals. If you've got people who are flaky or incoherent or perhaps even less than knowledgeable, you may find that there are massive holes opening up in the whole proceedings. You want to try and avoid that. Shameless plug, tomorrow we'll be doing continuing in our series called Cladding Matters at 3 o'clock. It's going to be a humdinger. Poor old Barrett is coming under the hammer once again in so many ways. As the original Grenfell report is adding grist to the mill. Also today, I'll be discussing with Chris Gilsenan things that rather jangle his gears, as it were. But we'll talk more about that later. I want to thank each of our esteemed membership. Hamish McLay of Search Convey, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke, and of course Chris Gilsenan of Route Home. Remember, you don't have to make the buying journey alone. If you find the right group around you, you can find that journey can even become, dare I say it, Chris, fun. Until the next time, try and keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Make sure you know who your friends are. Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Try and know what everybody is doing and be understanding of people, because they are also learning along with you. Until next time, try and look forward to this weekend and look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.